What would you do if you could go back in time and save the person you love? What if you failed? Would you try again and again and again until you finally succeeded? At first, that sounds beautiful. The idea of refusing to give up on someone you love. But what happens when you try so many times that you lose yourself in the process? What happens when saving someone stops being a choice and becomes the only reason you believe you exist? This is the story of Homura Akemi, one of the most psychologically fascinating characters in anime. Homura isn't terrifying because she's evil. She's terrifying because her love becomes so overwhelming that it begins changing the way she sees reality itself. Her story explores something deeply human. What happens when love turns into obsession? When we first see Homura, she appears cold, quiet, distant, almost emotionless. She doesn't seem interested in making friends. She doesn't seem interested in explaining herself. And she certainly doesn't look like someone who needs help. But this isn't who Homura originally was. The Homura we see at the beginning is the result of everything that happened before. Originally, Homura was shy. She lacked confidence. She struggled with her health. She had difficulty connecting with others. And then she met Madoka. Madoka treated her with kindness. She didn't see Homura as weak. She didn't treat her like someone who needed to be fixed. For perhaps the first time, Homura felt genuinely accepted. And that relationship changed her life. Homura's relationship with Madoka becomes the emotional center of her existence. But then she discovers something horrifying. Madoka is going to die. And Homura can't stop it. No matter how much she wants to protect her, she's powerless. And this is where Homura's story truly begins. She makes a wish. She wants to go back in time. She wants to meet Madoka again. And she wants to become strong enough to protect her. At first, this is an act of love. Homura isn't seeking power for herself. She's seeking the ability to save someone else. And that's important, because obsession rarely begins as obsession. It can begin with something completely understandable. Love, fear, grief, the desire to protect someone, the desire to fix something you regret. The problem begins when that desire becomes your entire identity. Imagine failing to save someone you love. Now imagine being given another chance. You go back, you try something different, you fail again. So you try again, and fail again. Every failure teaches you something. You become stronger, more experienced, more prepared. Eventually, you stop being the person who originally made the promise. You become someone completely shaped by the attempt to fulfill it. That's what happens to Homura. Every timeline changes her. Every failure adds another layer of emotional armor. The shy girl slowly disappears, and in her place, a determined warrior emerges. There is an important difference between determination and obsession. If determination says, "I will try again," obsession says, "I cannot stop." Determination allows you to adapt. Obsession can trap you. Homura becomes increasingly trapped by her goal. At first, she wants to save Madoka. Eventually, saving Madoka becomes the center of everything. Her relationships become secondary. Her own happiness becomes secondary. Her identity becomes secondary. The question stops being, "What do I want?" and becomes, "How do I save Madoka?" That difference is enormous, because when one goal becomes your entire identity, failure doesn't simply mean your plan failed. It feels like you failed, and that can become psychologically devastating. One of the darkest parts of Homura's story is repetition. She doesn't experience failure once, she experiences it repeatedly. And repetition changes the emotional meaning of failure. Imagine making the same mistake once. You can recover. Twice? Still manageable. 10 times? You might become frustrated. But imagine failing over and over again despite doing everything you can. Eventually, you might stop believing that success is possible. This is related to the psychological concept of learned helplessness, when repeated experiences of having little control can cause a person to stop expecting their actions to matter. But Homura develops in an unusual direction. Instead of giving up, she becomes more determined. Her response to helplessness isn't surrender, it's control. She tries to control more, plan more, prepare more, predict more. And that's where her strength and her suffering become connected. People often misunderstand Homura's personality. They see her expressionless face and assume she doesn't care. But it's almost the opposite. She cares so much that she has learned to hide it. Imagine experiencing the same loss repeatedly. Eventually, openly expressing your emotions becomes painful. So you stop, you become quieter, you become more controlled. You don't allow yourself to become attached to other people because attachment creates another opportunity for loss. Homura's coldness can therefore be understood as emotional armor. It's not necessarily the absence of emotion. It's the result of having too much emotion and nowhere safe to put it. This is where Homura's story becomes psychologically complicated. Love and attachment aren't exactly the same thing. Love can mean wanting someone to be happy, even when their happiness doesn't involve you. Attachment can become focused on the need to keep someone close or prevent them from changing. Homura begins with a desire to protect Madoka, but over time, her relationship with Madoka becomes increasingly complicated. Homura doesn't simply want Madoka to survive. She wants to determine the circumstances under which Madoka survives. She wants to prevent certain futures. She wants to eliminate certain possibilities. She wants to control the outcome. And this raises an uncomfortable question. When does protecting someone become controlling them? That's one of the central psychological questions behind Homura. Homura believes that if she can just find the correct strategy, everything will be okay. But life doesn't work that way. You can make plans. You can prepare. You can try to protect people. But you can't completely control another person's life. They have their own desires, their own decisions, their own definition of happiness. Homura struggles with this idea, because accepting that Madoka has her own choices means accepting something Homura desperately doesn't want to accept. Madoka might choose something Homura cannot prevent, and for someone who has spent countless timelines trying to control fate, that possibility is terrifying. Homura sacrifices almost everything: her normal life, her relationships, her emotional stability, her sense of time, her ability to live in the present. This raises another psychological question. Is sacrifice always noble? Not necessarily. Sacrifice can be meaningful, but excessive self-sacrifice can become destructive. If you constantly ignore your own needs, eventually there may be very little of you left. Homura doesn't simply sacrifice things. She begins defining herself through sacrifice. That's different. Instead of saying, "I am willing to sacrifice myself for someone I love," her identity becomes, "I exist to sacrifice myself for her." And that is where love begins turning into self-erasure. At the center of Homura's obsession is fear. Not hatred, not ambition, fear. The fear of losing Madoka, the fear of returning to the beginning, the fear that all her suffering was meaningless, the fear that if she stops fighting, everything she endured will have been for nothing. This is why letting go becomes almost impossible, because letting go wouldn't simply mean accepting loss. It could feel like admitting that all those timelines, all those battles, all that suffering didn't change anything. And humans are often extremely resistant to that idea. We want our suffering to have meaning. We want our sacrifices to matter. We want our past choices to have been worth it. Homura's tragedy is that she becomes trapped by that need. There's a psychological concept called the sunk cost fallacy. It describes our tendency to continue investing in something simply because we've already invested so much. You spend years studying something you no longer enjoy, but continue because you've already spent years on it. You stay in a relationship that makes you unhappy because you've already invested so much time. You continue a project that isn't working because you've already spent money on it. The rational question is, what is best from this point forward? But our emotions ask, how can I abandon everything I've already sacrificed? Homura's situation is far more extreme and fictional than ordinary sunk costs, but the psychological theme is similar. The more she sacrifices, the harder it becomes to stop, because stopping means confronting everything she has lost. Another fascinating part of Homura's character is her relationship with time. She's constantly focused on the past and future. The past represents failure. The future represents the possibility of saving Madoka. But where is the present? Almost nowhere. And this is surprisingly relevant to real life. People can become trapped in the past. I should have done this differently. Or trapped in the future. I'll finally be happy when this happens. But if you're constantly living in the past or future, you can miss the life happening right now. Homura's entire existence becomes focused on reaching a future that may never arrive. And that's part of what makes her tragedy so painful. She's fighting for a future while losing the present. Some people might ask, why doesn't she just stop? Because from Homura's perspective, stopping isn't neutral. Stopping means Madoka dies. Stopping means accepting defeat. Stopping means accepting that she couldn't fulfill her promise. And after everything she sacrificed, that becomes psychologically unbearable. This is why obsession can be so difficult to break. The person isn't simply choosing the behavior anymore. The behavior has become connected to their identity. To stop would require rebuilding their entire understanding of themselves, and that's incredibly difficult. Homura's story isn't saying that love is bad. Quite the opposite. Love is what gives her strength. Love is what gives her purpose. Love is what allows her to endure. but the story asks us to recognize something important. Even good emotions can become destructive when taken to an extreme. Love can become possessiveness. Protection can become control. Loyalty can become self-destruction. Determination can become obsession. Sacrifice can become self-erasure. The emotion itself isn't necessarily the problem. It's what happens when we stop maintaining boundaries around it. Homura's story gives us several lessons. 1. Don't make one person your entire identity. Loving someone is healthy, but your entire existence shouldn't depend on one person. You are more than your relationship with someone else. You have your own interests, your own goals, your own identity, your own future. 2. You cannot control someone's happiness. You can support someone, protect them when appropriate, give advice, be there for them, but you cannot completely control another person's choices, and trying to do so can damage both people. 3. Sacrifice has limits. Helping others is admirable. Destroying yourself completely isn't always healthy. You also have a responsibility to yourself. 4. Learn from the past without living inside it. Your past can teach you, but it shouldn't become a prison. You can't rewrite everything that happened. You can only decide what you do next. 5. Don't let one goal consume your entire life. Ambition is powerful, but if one goal becomes the only reason you're alive, failure becomes devastating. Have more than one source of meaning. Friends, family, creative work, learning, personal goals, experiences. Your identity should be bigger than one objective. The saddest thing about Homura isn't that she fails. It's that she succeeds in becoming strong, but loses much of the person she originally wanted to protect. The shy girl who simply wanted to be there for Madoka becomes someone capable of extraordinary things. But strength comes with a cost. She becomes harder, more isolated, more obsessive, more willing to cross boundaries. Her journey shows that becoming stronger doesn't automatically mean becoming healthier. You can become more capable while becoming more emotionally damaged. That's an important distinction in real life. Self-improvement shouldn't simply mean becoming more powerful. It should also mean becoming more balanced. Homura wants Madoka to be free, but her obsession with protecting Madoka can threaten that freedom. She wants Madoka to be happy, but she struggles to accept a happiness that she cannot control. She loves Madoka, but her fear of losing her can distort that love. And this contradiction is what makes Homura so fascinating. She isn't simply a hero. She isn't simply a villain. She's someone whose greatest virtue becomes her greatest weakness. Her devotion gives her incredible strength, but that same devotion prevents her from letting go. So, is Homura's love beautiful? Yes. Is it tragic? Absolutely. Is it healthy? Not always. And that's the point. Madoka Magica doesn't give us a simple message like, love is good. Instead it asks, what happens when love becomes the only thing you have left? Homura shows us the answer. You can become incredibly strong. You can endure unimaginable pain. You can keep fighting when everyone else gives up. But if you lose yourself completely in the process, what exactly are you saving? Homura Akemi's story is not simply a story about time travel. It's a story about grief. It's about fear. It's about love. And it's about the dangerous line between devotion and obsession. Homura starts as a girl who wants to protect someone she loves. She becomes stronger, then stronger again, and again, until eventually, the girl she once was is almost unrecognizable. Her greatest strength becomes her greatest weakness. Her love gives her purpose, but her fear of losing that love prevents her from living for herself. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson Homura can teach us. You can love someone deeply without losing yourself. You can protect someone without controlling them. You can learn from the past without living inside it. And you can care about someone without making their existence the only reason for your own. Because sometimes the hardest thing isn't fighting for the person you love. Sometimes it's learning to let that person choose their own path. And learning that you deserve a life of your own, too. That is the dark side of obsession. And that is what makes Homura Akemi one of the most tragic and psychologically fascinating characters in anime. Love can give you the strength to keep going, but you should never lose yourself just to keep someone else from leaving.